Now, when I finished Samantha, at the time, I didn't actually think I was going to make a trilogy. It was originally intended as a one-off. It was just this horror story. It was going to be a werewolf causing chaos. But there were some loose ends in the story. And I willfully kept them that way. There were ambiguities. And so the story, and again, I don't want to throw spoilers into it, but the story ended definitively. So you could read it as a one-off, and that was the intended purpose at the time. But a few years later, some of those loose ends that I had placed, they kind of, dare I say, gnawed at me a little. And I thought, there are actual other things to delve into with regard to the original story. And that led to really writing a sequel, which was The Happening. I have a copy of it, but I'm not showing it at the moment. Can show them later. And that book, which I wrote again a few years later, and I'd already been writing other books. That one really was difficult for me because it's like the middle sibling. Like, again, I intended it as a sequel, but as that story evolved when I was working on it, I was definitely in a place where I couldn't quite get it to where I wanted it to be. And I really went through it. That was easily, for all the things that I've written, and I've written like over 20 books, that one really put me through my paces. There was a period of time for like 6 months where I just could not hammer it out. It just didn't feel right. And all the work I'd done over the years and all the preparatory efforts, it was like nothing. It didn't click. And I was really in a place where like, oh my gosh, this book is beating me. And then after multiple revisions, multiple rewrites, multiple efforts, just a brute force, I got to a decent solution for that story. And that's one thing about my writing process. I always think of my writing in a kind of a problem solver way. Like the story idea, what if this? What if that? What is this? That is the problem that I have to solve as a writer. That's how I approach it. I'm kind of a problem solver by nature. And when I work on a book, it's a problem I have to solve. And when I get to a satisfactory ending on a story, I'm like, okay, I did it. The problem is solved. I can move on to whatever the next piece is that I'm going to work on, whatever it is. But if I can't solve the book, it puts me in a really bad place. It's kind of funny, when I get to an ending, I always know when I've got the right ending. I always know when I get to the right ending, because whatever the ideas are that are churning in my head, when I get to the right ending, it stops. And I'm like, there's the final line. There it is. And then I know, because if they're still like, well, what if this? What about that? That will be part of my process in terms of revision. And so The Happening was incredibly difficult because I couldn't satisfactorily get it. And then I realized toward after so many drafts and so much struggle with that book, I realized, okay, it's not just a sequel. It's actually the middle book. There needs to be a third book. And that book became Norm. So the Wolfshadow, that's why the Wolfshadow Trilogy. They're the 3 books. And I took ideas, and I can speak in more detail about The Happening at some point. But I took a lot of those ideas and letting it be, even though middle siblings are no doubt fraught, letting that book be kind of a willful, wild middle sibling, it worked. And then if Sam was a werewolf as lycanthropy as art, I went in the second book and made lycanthropy as revolution and almost an ideology of sorts. And that informed, that sort of unlocked that story for me in a way that I was like, okay, you've got a character from book 1 who, it's almost like for her, lycanthropy is like a superpower. And she's looking at the opportunities of what she can do with her lycanthropy. And that anchored book 2, The Happening, and let it flow absolutely naturally into this clash, this fight between the status quo lycanthropes and these revolutionary lycanthropes. And I think that was really the winning formula for that. I don't want to call it a formula, but there it is. That was the winning element that allowed me to solve that problem.